Chapter 31. Saturday morning. Mac just stared at her, as if his mind was trying to wrap around it. "We have to actually prove this." "You know that," he said with an attempt at a lighter tone. "We could talk to Penny. She might not even know what George did, if your theory is correct." "I know," she said. "It's quite possible she doesn't know anything about it. I was worried maybe she had killed George, but at this point, I think George committed suicide. So maybe let sleeping dogs lie." He shook his head. "I hear you, but if we can clear up either of these cold cases, there are families who want to know what happened to their loved ones." "I know," she said softly. "And Penny, of course, is the only family member left as far as Randy is concerned." "You don't know anything about the nurse's family." "Oh, I didn't even think of that," she said. She frowned, looking down at the datasheet. "I do need to understand the nurse thing." She tapped it in confusion. "I keep trying to fit that piece back in. Evidence is like that. Some of it fits, and some of it doesn't. Usually we're lucky if we can get 80% of it to make any sense." "Just keep lifting rocks," she said, "and see what nastiness crawls out." He chuckled at that. "What time is Scott coming?" "Noon to early afternoon," she said. "I'd like to get the rest of this reorganized and try to match up whatever pieces we can." "Which I think is a good idea. But you won't let this Penny thing go, will you?" "We should talk to Penny," she said. "I'm just not sure how to make that happen nicely." "Nicely?" She slid a look at him. "I'm pretty sure she was my intruder last night." He stared at her. "Not if she jumped over a fence, she wasn't." She frowned at that and nodded. "No, that's a good point. A very good point." She sat back and remembered her surprise as the intruder jumped the fence. She sat up straight suddenly. "There were two of them," she cried out. "Because, when I came around the corner of my fence, somebody much bigger jumped over that neighbor's fence. And I didn't realize it at first, but you're right. It was someone else. The hoodie was also darker." "So now you've got Penny and an accomplice?" And then she knew who that was too. She nodded, then groaned. "I don't know why and I don't know how, but it's Penny and Steve." He raised both hands in frustration. "Okay, now I really don't understand." "We need Penny to explain it," she said slowly. "It's hardly like you can go up to her and say, 'Hey, so, did George commit suicide and did he kill your father, and were you the one who broke into my garage last night?' Right. And why would Penny even care about getting into your garage?" She lifted both books and said, "You've seen this one, but you haven't seen this one." He looked at her and asked, "Where was that?" "When I pulled out one of the workbench drawers, it fell to the ground. I pocketed it, and didn't get a chance to really look at it until this morning." He started at the beginning of the little black book and said, "This is from a long time ago." "I know, and I haven't had a chance to really figure it all out." He sat back and flipped through the pages, reading every entry. When he got to one, he lifted his gaze and said, "He did kill her father." "Well, it doesn't specifically say so, but it does say, problem solved." He nodded and kept reading. "You're right though. All the puzzle pieces don't make a whole lot of sense." "But it does, since it mentions a Nancy here," he said slowly. "George talks about meeting with her." Mac looked up at Doreen. "This definitely connects George to Nancy." "But why? Was she a victim of Penny's father's? Was she a victim of George's?" Mac flipped through it all and said, "This is almost a confession. I think George wrote it just afterward, just after he had killed someone, and then hung on to it all these years, and it's the part that bothered him. And maybe he lost the book and that terrified him, thinking somebody would find it. Because in the other book, he does talk about needing to find something." She held up the journal. "We just don't know what." The older one was jammed in the back of the workbench drawer. Why he kept the nurse's ID, I don't know. Maybe as a reminder of what he'd done? But then, as to why he burned it, well, that's yet another mystery. Have you checked through all of George's drawers? She shook her head. I haven't had time. He stood up and said, no time like the present. He removed the chair at the kitchen door and stepped outside. She went first to the drawers where she had found the 2 books and said, this is where both of them were. She pulled them out, and pieces of paper, yellowed and old, were in there. At the bottom was one folded up. It's the death certificate for Penny's father. She laid it down so Mac could see it. Cause of death, a single gunshot to the head, Mac read. It's not out of line that George and Penny would have this. Randy was Penny's father. And then she picked up another piece of paper, glanced at it, and handed it over. This was a faded purchase record of a weapon. Mac whistled. This is a handwritten note and no names are on it, saying a purchase was made for a revolver, he said. Even the number on it is hard to read. It's been fading out for so many years. She nodded and picked up another piece of paper. I can't really see what this is either. No, but it's got Nancy's name on it, Mac said, frowning. He placed it on top of the other paperwork and said, why would he have left all this in this drawer? Maybe because he wanted to be caught, to be punished. Maybe he wanted to confess, she said. He was very religious. This had to eat away at him. But then why wouldn't Penny have cleaned it out? I don't think she knew any of this stuff was here. She said this wasn't her world. She never went into the garage, never had anything to do with George's tools. So what's this Steve guy got to do with that? They're old friends. And for all I know, he knew. So what then? They both came back last night looking for it? If he happened to stop by her place and realized the garage was empty, he might very well have told her about the books and the papers. Then they came here after them. Mac looked at her and sighed. Some of this makes a crazy kind of sense, but none of it's conclusive. I know, she said, and that's why we need Penny. Just then her phone rang. Doreen, Penny said, I hope you got everything home okay. A couple documents I need apparently were stored in one of those drawers I wasn't aware of. Do you mind if I come and check the drawers for it? Oh my goodness, of course not, Penny. Come on by, Doreen said, staring at Mac. I'm working in the garage myself. We got it all set up again, but I've been moving furniture out of the basement, so I haven't had a chance to go through any of the drawers yet. If you don't mind, I'll come now then, Penny said fretfully. I wouldn't want that stuff to get into the wrong hands. People would get the wrong idea. And she hung up, leaving Doreen to stare at Mac. She's coming here for this stuff right now.